Welcome to this episode of On the Record, your official source of information from Bossier Schools.
Thanks for joining us for this special edition of On the Record with Bossier Schools. I'm Sonia Bales. As we are recording this episode, the Louisiana House Education Committee is debating House Bill 745, which calls for the creation and provision of the Louisiana Gator Scholarship Program, a universal school choice program that would launch in the 2025-26 academic year. A companion bill, SB 313, has already passed out of the Senate Education Committee. This proposed legislation is drawing vocal opposition from public school districts throughout the state for a number of reasons. We have a powerhouse team gathered here for a roundtable discussion to peel back the layers of what this means to your public schools and tax dollars. Joining us to go on the record are, first of all, Desoto Parish School Superintendent Clay Corley, who also serves as chair of the Region 7 Superintendents Association, Webster Parish School Superintendent Johnny Rowland Jr., and Bossier Schools Superintendent Jason Rowland. So thank you all for joining us for this roundtable discussion. You know, a few weeks ago, we took a deep dive into parent or school choice and education savings accounts and their impact on public schools. But for those who may not have caught that episode, let's kind of backtrack a little bit if we can, because it sounds great on the surface and we don't disagree that parents should have a choice when it comes to their child's education. But again, there's more to it than meets the eye.
First of all, thank you, Sonia. I want to thank Clay and Johnny for coming in. They're coming in on spring break. That's how critical this issue is, of what's happening today in Baton Rouge, what's happening tomorrow in Baton Rouge are extremely important, and it impacts public schools in a tremendous manner. So when we talk about parent choice, it's something that it sounds really good on the surface, right? Mm-hmm. But it's good when there's transparency. It's good when there's parity, and it's good when there's accountability. And so, to be honest with you, that is not the case with what's being provided in Senate Bill 313, House Bill 745, companion bills that are being discussed and debated right now. The equity and parity of these compared to public education, there is no comparison. And it's sad to see that we have people that are promoting this and debating these as approved alternate providers, and public education stand on equal footing, and they do not. Mm-hmm. And there's no defense of it.
Right. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about here in this conversation: accountability, transparency, parity. Johnny, I want to ask you, because Louisiana already has a voucher system in place for low-income students who are attending low-performing schools. So how is the Louisiana Gator Scholarship Program different? I know that it employs the use of proposed education savings accounts, or ESAs.
Mm-hmm. Well, the difference is that in prior years, just what you said, vouchers were given to or have been available to certain kids in certain situations. Now, what we're learning is that's not going to be the case. And you have, for example, this. You may have, like for a private school or parochial school, those that will be allowed to take advantage of the potential ESA that's been paying for that service for years and years and years. And that's one critical change from the way that it has been through the voucher program. And
so those could be potentially public dollars. I have to ask.
It could be
to even a religious private school.
We talked the other day in our regional superintendents meeting that we had about this right here. You hear a lot of talk about short term, mm-hmm. okay, but you also have to think about what's going to happen in the long term. What will be the long term ramifications? And we had some brief discussion about how maybe in the first year or two, these ESAs, vouchers, what have you, could be funded, but we're all leery, we're cynical that eventually, well, it's already been discussed, that it's going to come over into our MFP dollars, mm-hmm. that we so critically need every dollar.
That's right.
And, so, and then we think about, okay, are things fair and equitable? I've always thought about that because in the public school system, we have so many things that we must adhere to, uh, things that we must do, such as testing, which then leads to school performance scores, district performance scores that the public, looks at, when other types of schools do not, and that's just one. So not to belabor the point, but these are just a few small examples of things that we are concerned with in the very early going here, near the surface.
Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily improve student performance. Right.
I think that's definitely a fair statement. And I just can't say enough until the playing field is fair and equitable, and we're all held accountable by the same standards and rules and regulations. We've got a problem.
Yeah. In fact, I want to throw out this fact. In research, a 2016 study found that school voucher students in Louisiana attending private schools actually performed significantly worse in math. And then in Milwaukee, students using vouchers fared no better academically than their public school peers. So it goes back to your point there. I want to follow that money trail a little bit more, because that's the sticking point. This legislation would essentially take public tax dollars and take them away from public schools that are already struggling. MFP has remained flat for a number of years, and divert that money to help subsidize private education and these non-public school providers.
Yeah, I think it's a very slippery slope, almost to a cliff, is the way I see it, where we're at. We're expected to do more with less. And, I think our 3 districts show that where resources meet expectations, good things happen. While those resources continue to diminish, expectations seemingly continue to rise. And I think we're at an impasse right now where we really have to do some hard thinking around, does that really make sense? Are we able to raise the bar while we're receiving fewer resources? And I think it's definitely a slippery slope in a rural system such as mine or Superintendent Rowland here in Webster, more rural, where the resources are more limited. And I know we in Desoto are very thankful and blessed to have some of the resources that many rural districts don't have. But it's a dangerous time for us all. And proponents of ESAs would say, well, it's my tax dollars that I want to take and do what's right for my child. And while I would agree with them that choice could be theirs and maybe should be theirs, but when you take your tax dollars, you're also taking my tax dollars and everyone else who's investing in that system. And if you show me a thriving school system, I'll show you a thriving community. The two are not mutually exclusive. And I worry about the viability of our community schools. And specifically as a rural school system superintendent, that is one of the things that I think that we use to educate our children, to provide the values and the strong sense of community that sometimes is so often forgotten in our society. And it's a trying time that if this legislation goes forward, will continue to erode at the finances and the resources that we're given.
Well, you're spot on about the success of a public school district being centric to a community's success. I mean, it dictates property values if you want to really peel back the layers too. It's not alternative school options that drive property values higher.
And Clay made a great point. In districts like ours, and even Bossier, which is a much larger district, even here where we're located, the vast majority of the public depends on the public school system. We're it. And they depend on us greatly to serve so many needs.
Well, I want to go back to these non-public providers, if you will. If they decide to participate in the Louisiana Gator Scholarship Program, are they going to be required to accept all children like public school systems are?
Well, absolutely not. And realize that the approved providers that are non-public, they will set up their own admissions. That's already been happening, from what I understand, is how admission standards will be set. And so, by and large, students with disabilities may struggle to find a place. Lower socioeconomic income students may struggle to find a place. And so it'll be selective admission, and in the purest sense, Mr. Corley and I, Bossier and Desoto are still under degrees. In my opinion, the ESAs are just another form of segregation. And it's a modern form of segregation in how we are dividing education across Northwest Louisiana. And my whole thing the entire time has been, reform can't be all the same for every district, because one size does not fit all. Mm-hmm. Our 3 districts are completely different, but highly successful in what we do and how we do it. And so when you start trying to cookie cutter and just place reform that is not applicable to certain districts in certain areas, whether it be in Northwest Louisiana, whether it be in Lincoln Parish or Ouachita Parish, Rapides Parish, Calcasieu Parish, these are fantastic districts. Ascension Parish, these are places that have fantastic public school systems. Why would the state, why would anybody want to cripple successful school systems that are thriving? Mm-hmm. And I've said this before, sometimes the blindest people are those who refuse to see. And that's what we're dealing with.
You mentioned students with disabilities. Some non-public providers might not be able to offer the array of services that a public school system can. You're also talking about children who might not be academically gifted. There might be behavior issues. There's the ESL population. So if they're denied access to these non-public providers, is that school choice?
It's not school choice. Then what's
going
to happen
they don't have a choice, right?
Is they will not have a choice, and the public schools, who we accept everybody, and we embrace that. That's not something we have to do, it's something that we get to do. We take everyone, and we want to try to meet the need of the student and take them from where they are to where they need to be.
Mm-hmm. So, Johnny, you and I were talking a little bit earlier before the broadcast, and sets us up as a state to go back to the segregation era.
Well, you're right. And as we were talking earlier, in Webster Parish, we had been under a consent decree for a long time, mm-hmm. many, many years. And about 10 years ago, the board took on the challenge of becoming unitary and achieved unitary status. I'm concerned that because of what could happen under this proposed format, that districts like mine that are now unitary could find themselves back under a consent decree because of what could be several different factors. Because what I see now is potentially this. Whereas years and years and years ago, if you remember the Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, the law, or theory rather, that had been the law of the land was found to be unconstitutional because, the Supreme Court determined that separate was not equal. Now, to expand, we all see, because we've discussed this a lot, that you're going to have a greater divide between the haves and the have-nots. And it doesn't necessarily just fall between racial lines. Now you're going to see, as Jason mentioned, Clay too, along socioeconomic lines. Mm-hmm. And it is a great concern that we all have because of that.
Absolutely. There's no question that ESAs can be very costly. 13 other states, in fact, across the nation already have them, and they have run into problems with cost projections. In fact, Arizona, for example, just this school year, 23-24, ESAs have cost taxpayers more than $900 million. That is a 1,400% higher amount than originally anticipated. So they're grappling with that. And also the Public Affairs Council of Louisiana just came out. It's a nonpartisan organization, by the way, placed the cost of the Louisiana Gator Scholarship Program annually in the next 5 to 7 years at $522 million. That's tax dollars in Louisiana. So the big question is, where does that come from? And how could a constitutional convention potentially come into play?
You know, going back to the point you just made about Arizona, because of a personal matter, Jason and I recently just drove through 150, 200 miles of western Arizona. And this was a topic we talked about a lot. Just view the landscape out there, wondering how all that worked in western Arizona, just based upon what we saw and how rural and non-populated that area is out there. I wondered how it worked, how this would work for kids in that area. I know
We never saw a school.
Really?
We went 250 miles and never passed a school. Clay?
Well, I think this is part of maybe the greatest distraction from what matters most that I've seen in my 30 years, and that the political polarization of society now. You're either way on one side or the other, and your opinion matters and no one else's does. And you have all the answers, and the other side has none of the answers. And guess where our children are stuck? They're stuck in the middle. Yeah. And unfortunately, all of that serves as a distraction or it's a distraction of focus, but a distracting of funding and of effort. So, if our efforts to fix public education are to improve options outside of public education, I think we're amiss in our effort. And I just think about our teachers that do such a great job, and I lie awake at night wondering how I can give them more. Now giving them more with less, but I wonder. We've had this conversation a lot about. We will all give a raise or give a supplement or a stipend when we can or when funding is available. And I know our 3 districts have done that over time. It's a Band-Aid or a thank you card, a thank you note instead of something lasting. And so we typically are trying to get our workforce from the same pool,
right.
And that pool is not growing.
No, it's
not
shrinking.
Getting deeper, right? It's only becoming more shallow. So I would hope that the state would put more effort into taking care of our teachers and elevating the profession, right. And doing so that all of our districts can continue to rise, and not just because we pay $10,000 more, I can get a few more teachers when it's taking away from another public school system. Like we shouldn't be fighting against each other, but I think that's part of the distraction, and it's disappointing. But yet, when we talk about choice, everyone has a choice except the public school system, and our only choice is to do right by our families, by our communities, by our kids.
Well, there's a reason public education is one of only 2 areas constitutionally protected by Louisiana: public education and health care. So essentially, if there's a constitutional convention and it goes to voters on the, let's just say, November ballot, this would enable potentially more hands to get into the MFP pie, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And it could be detrimental to public school districts around the state that depend heavily on the state's allotment of that public.
Because then they will have less money to be able to pay teachers who are already, by the way, underpaid and below the Southern regional average. So then you have less money. You have a potential reduction in workforce there. If you have fewer teachers, then you have fewer programs that you can offer your students at your schools, right?
And we begin to go backwards.
That's exactly right.
Which is what we don't want to do. In any district, not just our 3, but in any district across the state, we're always ingrained to go forward, move ahead, grow, and then you start taking things away from you.
Yeah, and it definitely has a trickle-down effect on your economy then, because then your school system is not as viable, if you will, or attractive to families moving in.
Good point.
Yeah. I want to talk one last thing about athletics, how this would potentially affect athletics, particularly under, consent decree and not consent decree.
Yeah, well, I think the LHSA is set up to address some of these issues. I mean, with requirement for residency, and if a child doesn't live in the district in which they attend, then they would have to sit out. So I would assume that it would apply likewise, and thankful that those kind of situations are in place. But I also think that could go any number of directions potentially, depending upon what legislative action might be taken.
I did speak to the executive director, and he did confirm that he did go to the Capitol and offered a one-time transfer eligibility, and the legislature said no. And so we will continue with the same handbook, the same rules, the same eligibility, the same things that this private organization, which is the LHSA, has always been governed by. Those rules will stay in place. And if somebody left Bossier and went to an approved provider somewhere else, they would have to sit out for a year.
So school districts throughout the state are adopting resolutions right now opposing this proposed legislation. So what is the next step? What can we do?
Have y'all, here in Bossier, have y'all approved your resolution?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
Ours is on our agenda in Webster Parish, April 1, so it'll be next Monday.
Ours next Thursday.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing you can do is reach out personally to those legislators that represent you. Ensuring that they're asking the right questions. I feel like this is a fast-moving train that very few questions are being asked, and I think that is the concern. So just asking them to make sure someone's answering those questions as to the implementation.
Yeah. It's definitely a bullet train, because we were just discussing how there have already been amendments that have been filed to the proposed legislation just this morning. So, and none of it in favor of public school districts, I will say. So, yes, please reach out to your lawmakers, stand up for public education. In the meantime, I know that we are all going to do whatever we can to continue to elevate the educational experience, not just providing an education, but elevating the experience itself. And we're going to be following this legislative session very closely. So in light of that, we hope that you will like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, On the Record with Bossier Schools, so you do not miss a single episode as we follow the money trail, SB 313, House Bill 745, and the 131 other bills that have been filed regarding education in the state of Louisiana just this session. Thank you all for being here this morning. Great discussion. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sonia Bales, going on the record with Bossier Schools.
This has been a Bossier Schools production. Join us next time when we go on the record with Bossier Schools.